for All podcast. I am comedian Nazareth, and thank you so much for joining us again for episode number 82. We've been with you 82 weeks, people, before the pandemic, through the pandemic, and hopefully, as the pandemic is gone, we continue to bring you comedians and leaders who can really enrich your life. You will, in every episode, I guarantee you, you will get something that will really lift you up, encourage you, and some new ideas that will help you. So today will be no exception. Also, I want to remind you to subscribe to the podcast to be able to to get it. Just subscribe and let your friends know about it. And also want to remind you about every 7:30 p.m. Pacific time every night, weeknight, we have the Live with Nash show where you get to laugh for an hour and be encouraged. So join us tonight for show number 265 and join us every single weeknight on Facebook under Comedian Nazareth or on YouTube under Comedian Nazareth TV. So we'd love to see you. Today, my guest is a friend and a neighbor. And Chris is a founding and lead pastor of South Hills Church, a multi-state, multi-campus church based in Southern California. Chris is a best-selling author and founder of Church Boom. And he's also just an amazing leader and speaks on leadership. Pastor Chris, welcome to the Laughter for All podcast.
Oh man, hey, thanks. It's good to see my man Nazareth, one of the funniest guys I know.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you. You know, you're one of the first ones that really believed in me and gave me some spots. I think even right when you started South Hills. How long ago did you start South Hills?
that was 22 years ago.
22 years ago. And you grew up and you had several campuses
Yeah,
and then you decided to move to Texas and still lead the church but also help other churches.
yeah. Well, I don't live in Texas. I don't know. maybe,
I know
maybe
you were there for a long time, back and
we were
forth.
doing some work there. We had some sites there. I live in Southern California now, but yeah, I we have a central location, what we call centralized services, and so we keep growing our campuses and bringing up new ones. And then I spend a lot of time from that level, but also from the level of just uh, coaching and helping churches across the nation. We coach about 100 churches a month just to help them figure out how to grow, how to get them unstuck.
How did that? Little Chris was born where?
Long Beach, California, in the
Okay.
same hospital of Tiger Woods. There's my claim to fame. There you go.
And were your parents believers?
No, no.
No. What did you know you were going to be a pastor at one point in your life?
Yeah, I did. Well, I got invited to a youth group about 14 or 15 years old, got invited to a youth group, just a normal church youth group. I liked it, went back a couple more times. I kept liking it. And one thing led to another. By the time I was 17 or 18, graduating high school, I just thought, man, I want to do what that youth pastor does. I want to make a difference for Jesus and make that my life. And so, yeah, I didn't grow up in a Christian home per se, but yeah, just kind of went to a youth group, and from there, kind of grew into going to Bible college, and here we are.
Wow. And what did your parents think when you became a believer? How did they react to that?
Oh, it wasn't. There was nothing negative about it. I wouldn't say it was positive. I wouldn't say it was negative. It was just like, if you want to go be a part of that. They probably, some of my siblings had some trouble, in their late teenage, early 20 years. And I'm the youngest of five. So they probably were like, hey, if you're not doing drugs or anything, that's a good deal. So just stay with that.
That's fun. Now, what did you work for another church before you joined you started South Hills?
Oh yeah, definitely. I worked for a couple different churches. I was a youth pastor at a couple different churches, and then served as a youth pastor. Worked with it, and then kind of moved into the college area, working with college students. Went to church in LA, a church up in Sacramento, and then found myself back in Southern California, age 29, and thought I'm gonna start a church and see if it works. And We did. I had a whole I had a whole $5,000 in my account, and I thought, well, we're gonna start a church with $5,000, and that's all I had in my account. We started the church with literally $5,000.
And now you have how many campuses for South Hills?
13.
13.
Yeah.
Are they all in California or different?
No. I think there's what? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's let's see, 9 in California, 1 in Idaho, 1 in Puerto Rico, 1 in Johannesburg, 1 in Kenya.
Were those locations like? Did you feel the Lord telling you to open them, or just opened up?
Yeah, I would say a little bit of both. Sometimes I felt like God was like, okay, you guys, we felt pretty good about Idaho. We started a church there. The Johannesburg, there was a lot of relationship there. We were coaching the guy anyway, and he was going to start a church. And so it just we merged the idea of him becoming a South Hills Johannesburg. So I wouldn't say we were thinking, hey, we want to go to Johannesburg, but I think sometimes those things kind of fall into your lap and you kind of figure out, well, is this the right thing? And you move forward with it. And so that's what
funny thing that happens to you while you're, starting the South Hills, the first main one. Any funny stuff?
Gosh. Yeah, I got the greatest story on the planet. This will take a few minutes. So
take your time. Take your time, please.
Well, let me tell you, I don't know if I ever told. Apparently, I didn't tell you the story. So here's how it went down. So we started South Hills Church 22 years ago. Whenever I speak about church planting or starting a church, I was just at a conference last week in New Mexico with 400 or 500 pastors in the room. I always say, hey, if you have a worse starting of a church than the story I'm about to tell you, then please come and talk to me, because I've never heard one worse. Bro, I've been saying that for 22 years and I still haven't had someone come up and go, oh, I got one worse. Oh. Mine is the worst it could possibly. So we opened up on March 29th, 1998. And there's a thing called, this is back when video cassettes were on their way out and DVD was on its way in. So, a DVD was going to be like $1.50 or $2, $2.25, but you could get what's called a once pass tapes. That's a tape that was used and then they take off whatever was the label and they clean it up, and now it's 26 cents. So that doesn't sound like a big difference between $1.50 and 26, but if you want to do 10,000 of them and you're a church planner, that's a lot of money. So we said, well, we'll do the once pass tape. So we made a 4-minute video about our church. And this is before we started the church, right? So we make a 4-minute video, which making a 4-minute video about a church that doesn't exist is hard to do, because you got people on there going, it's changed my life, and I'm like, we haven't had a service yet, you liar. And we make this 4-minute video, right? So we make it, whatever, and we send it out to 10,000 homes. And I'm sure you've done mass mailing. You have to send it to what's called a mail house. Yeah. And then you say, okay, in this certain area of the city, how many homes are there? Oh, there's about 10,000. Okay, send it to those homes. So they label them, like resident or to the, current resident. That stuff, all the mail stuff, we get all the junk mail. And so we sent it out to 10,000 homes, and our church is going to open up March 29th, and we sent it out on the Monday before that. So March, whatever that would be, 22nd or something, 23rd. So we sent it out on a Monday, Tuesday, something like that. Here's what happens, Nazareth. So
I kind of knew what's going to happen. Oh,
yeah, no, it's just bad. So first of all, of course, the easy one to figure out is not all the tapes got cleaned up. So 10,000 tapes go out. Okay. Problem 1, phone call ring, phone rings. I pick it up. I'm like, yeah, South Hills, which is just at my house, Yeah. So you put people on hold and you play music because you want to sound like you really got it all together. When reality is we don't have anybody in our church except for like 10 people. So then anyway, a guy calls me up and he's like, hey man, I think it's cool you're starting a church and I live in the city and I looked at your video, and he goes, I don't know how to tell you this, pastor. I said, what? And he goes, before you come on, he goes, like for the first 4 or 5 seconds, he goes, there's 3 or 4 people on there. And he goes, and they don't have any clothes on.
Oh no. Like,
what?
Oh no.
And I'm like, what? And he goes, it's like a little bit of porno. And then he goes, all of a sudden it's the pastor. And I'm like, oh dear God, that's just not a good way to start a church. So That was a disaster. That literally happened. And then the next phone call, there was the label machine got stuck at the mail house. So it ended up printing out the same address. So one guy calls me and says, "There's naked people on there," and that may be on his video or maybe on 100 videos. I don't know. But then the lady calls me and she was letting me have it because by accident, because of the problem at the mail house, 7,000 of the videos went to the same house.
Oh, that,
7,000 videos. Same house. So people say, "Hey, how was your start when you started the church?" I said, "Well, let me tell you about week one."
but you know what? Aren't you glad those 7,000 didn't go to 7,000 people? And so the how many did people attend the church after that expecting something different?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Chris, I gotta tell the people watching and listening, you're one of the most humble people I know. As pastor who is at your caliber, and your books and your best-selling author, New York Times, and all these channels you've been on, you're very humble. Now, someone might ask the question, why is this guy leading 13 churches? Isn't God have enough sheep to handle one each church? Isn't it better to have one guy run each church? What do you say to them?
Well, I think that I think you have to live out to your capacity. You know, the Bible teaches, Jesus taught a story about the parable of talents, and he said, to one he gave five, to one he gave two, to one he gave one. I don't know if I'm a five, two, or one. I just know that I want to live out what God has called us to do and our capabilities. So we just have felt like, man, we want to keep launching churches, keep them in the same stream, style, and culture. There's a thing that we always say is that, is it better to have one big McDonald's or a bunch of little ones? And then the answer is, what gets food to the people quicker? Just set them out there. And so some are smaller, some are larger. That's not even our point. The point is that we want to keep launching them out there so that we can affect people and affect communities. So, and I think that's where God's called us to do. I don't think he's called everybody to do that. But for anybody that's watching right now, you got to figure out, if you believe in God and you have a faith in God, it's like, God, what do you want me to do? And because the parable of the talents is about like, hey, I stand before God, and it's like, here's God going, here's the gift I gave you. Now what'd you do with it? And I just want to be able to say, hey, I don't know if I got it all right, but man, I tried. I really tried. And
Yeah.
yeah, so that's kind of our thought process, or my thought process on that.
I had the pleasure to know your wife, Laura. She's so upbeat, so always in a great mood, great teacher, but has she, at one point, said, "You know what, Chris, we're done. We don't want to do this anymore." Have you ever had this conversation with her?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, times where it gets frustrated, or times where it gets like, you're burned out or you're frustrated or whatnot. I think those seasons come. I think any pastor that wouldn't say that would, maybe not be completely transparent. It doesn't mean, it doesn't mean you quit. It doesn't mean you do anything else. It just means you're facing a difficult time. And boy, it would be a lot easier to not do A, B, and C if we just did this, or whatever. But yeah, there's those moments, I think, you know, anytime that you're pursuing a dream and going after it, whatever God-given dream is inside of your heart and God puts in there, opposition always comes, and struggles always come. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But you keep persevering. But to say that you don't have moments where you want to quit, or moments where you want to throw in the towel, or moments where you want to try something else, yeah, of course, absolutely.
But now, you mentioned twice already, living to your capacity that God gave you, living your dreams that God gave you. You know, there's a lot of people who don't know what that is. They don't know what is God wants them to do. I know you wrote a book on that, and I'll tell you it's called. In search of higher grounds, or also you did a statement, that I read on Instagram, is God, it says God is not looking for us to be something we're not. How do you find, let's say someone watching said, how do I find who I am and what God wants me to do? What do you say? Please take your time with this one, because that's a big deal for a lot of Christians.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I have a mission statement I created for myself. Um, I think every, business has mission statements or whatever. My mission statement was to serve people's dreams. I like to figure out what people want, and help them fulfill that. So I'm a huge fan of that. I'm a huge fan of kind of discovering people's dreams, if you will, and helping them with that. Now, with that said, that's kind of into my definitely in my wheelhouse, Nazareth, of like trying to help people figure out, now, what does God want me to do? There's a scripture that talks about that God gives us the desires of our hearts. At the end of the day, I think people know what, I really honestly think most people know what they want to do. And what I mean by that is, God gives us the desire of our heart, the passions. The way I ask people, I was on a plane a while back, and someone literally asked me that question: how do you know what you're to do? And I said, well, what would you do? What would you honestly do? Spend the rest of your life doing? Don't say golfing, because that's not the answer. And I'm not, not that you would enjoy life, but what would you do? Like, where would you what would you put your hand to if money was removed from the issue? So here you go, Bob. Here's $50 million. Now you don't need to worry about money anymore. Literally on the plane, I go, what would you do? I said, I would help handicapped children. I would start centers that would do this. What I would do is I'd teach these handicapped kids how to ride horses, and I would do this and I would do that. And I was like, it only took you seconds for you to start spilling out what was inside of your heart. And God puts the desires inside of our heart. And so I think what we find is that people are like, I don't know, I got to hear God's voice, or I got to do whatever. And I'm a pastor, and I'm supposed to tell people I hear God's voice all the time. I don't. I hear his voice through his word, the Bible, and it tells me that God gives me the desires of my heart. And so when you ask people, hey, what would you do if money was not an object? All money issues are removed. Now, what would you do? Then I think you really find the essence of what that person wants to do, or what is inside of them to do. Now, the flip side of that is, they now have to overcome a few issues. They have to overcome fear, and they have to overcome doubt, and they have to overcome insecurity. And then the fourth thing I always tell people is fear, doubt, insecurity, and other people's opinions. I always tell people that. And I said, so look, you got to overcome fear. You're afraid. I get it. You're afraid of stepping out. You're afraid of pursuing a dream. You're afraid of what it would happen. And whenever I talk about fear, I say the real reason that we have the fear is because we don't have the belief. And it's a great statement. Fear must submit to belief. So
fear must submit to belief. That's amazing.
Fear must submit to belief. So when belief goes up, fear comes down, because fear always submits to belief. So if someone says to me, hey, Chris, I have a fear problem, I say to them, no, you actually have a belief problem, because fear submits to belief. And so the more you believe in who God is for your life, the more you believe in your own personal calling, the more you believe in yourself. When the belief goes up, the fear goes down. So fear gets in the way, doubt gets in the way. Can I do this? Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I capable enough? You live with the memories of how people have branded you, how the football coach made you feel, when you got kicked off the team, how the teacher made you feel stupid, how your mom or dad said this to you. And so we live under that branding of what people have labeled us. And so that doubt gets in the way. Insecurity, big one. Everybody has insecurity. I just spoke on that a couple of weeks ago at a conference. I was like, insecurity, it's huge. There's no getting around it. I don't know if it is a problem to solve, but I know it's a tension you have to manage, because insecurity is always there. And then the last one I always tell people is like, when they know what their passion is, the fourth one is other people's opinion. And that is a big one. We tend to sort of submit to people's opinion. We let the opinion shape our ability. Hey, Nazareth, you're not that funny. You can't be a comedian. Well, I'm sure someone said something mean to you along the way, and you're either going to believe that opinion or you're not. Someone told me a while back that their parents, said these things about them, especially they focused on their dad. And I said, well, I think you have a choice from this point forward? Are you going to listen to your earthly father? Or are you going to listen to your heavenly father?
Mm.
Which one are you going to listen to? Because whichever one you listen to is going to brand your life. But we let other people's opinion get in our way. I don't know what it is, but we are all guilty of letting other people's opinions get in the way. And here's the funny thing: is we have a tendency to listen to people that are poor and broke. I don't know why that is. Like, the guy's broke, his life's not going good, but he tells us something and then we listen to it. Or she tells us something and we listen to it.
Right.
And I don't know why we do that. And one thing I always say is this, that anybody that's ever criticized me, Nazareth, about a dream or an idea or a concept is usually below me, not above me.
Mm.
Think about anybody that's ever criticized you. On the scale of life and success, if you're going to scale it, they're probably below you. They're not above you. The people above you are cheering you on. The people below you, here's what they're doing. They're bringing you down to a level that's comfortable for themselves. And
Exactly.
Why do they do that? Because your desire for excellence threatens their mediocrity. That's why people bring you down to that level. So fear, doubt, insecurity, and other people's opinions get in the way of what we know we are to do. And I think, I'm not saying everybody, but in most cases, if you ask them, what's your passion? What would you do if money wasn't an issue? Most everybody has an answer. There's your answer, because God gives you what? The desire of your heart. So what are you passionate about? Handicapped kids, that person on the flight. That only took a second for them to say it. Well, because they knew it. So anyway, those are some thoughts on that idea of how people discover who they are and kind of what gets in the way of that.
Have you ever had someone like from Calvary Chapel or pastor or Baptist said, "This is a new age teaching," or what do you say to that?
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh goodness. Yeah, just Google my name. You'll see all sorts of people making comments. Yeah, no, they do. I think that they do. If they're not doing as well, they'll usually call the approach watered down. That's a nice way of making the individual feel better about what's happening in their ministry. But yeah, I think people do. I don't feel that way. The answer is always Jesus. The answer is always have a relationship with him. Yeah, he comes before all things. Colossians 1:17, he's before all things, and in him all things hold together. I believe that with all my heart. But I also think that God wires us to motivate people. And I think everything I share is to motivate people towards them having a relationship with God and them fulfilling God's purpose for their life. I'm wired motivationally. I speak motivationally. I speak at Verizon, Home Depot, and other places motivationally at their big, executive conferences or whatever. I love that stuff. But Jesus, it all starts with Jesus.
Do they know when you're a pastor when they hire you to speak like at Verizon and others, or there's warnings before?
There's a little label like on a cigarette thing says warning. This may hurt you. No, sometimes they know. I'll tell you one thing was really awesome is so I spoke for Verizon. And they have multiple vice presidents, probably 100 of them, because they're such a big organization. It's interesting. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's in in New Jersey. It's the second largest building in the United States, Pentagon, and then the Verizon building.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, it's the second largest building in the United States. So a few years back, they had me. I've spoken for them at least 15, 20 times. And they had me come speak at their big Verizon building. And I pulled up and I was like, my goodness, this place is huge. They have 5 different colored carpets. So you're in the brown area, the red area, the blue area, depending on the color of carpet. I talked to the security guy. I go, how many people radio you that they're lost? He goes, 15 to 20 a day. They can't figure out where to go. So anyway, they have a huge conference facility, and I spoke at it. I get done speaking. And the one of the many vice presidents who I know, and I won't say his name, but who I know, person comes up and says, "Hey, Vice President so-and-so wants to see you in his office." And the security guy will take you there because it's a ways away. So I'm like, okay. So through the brown, blue, red, orange, and pink carpet, whatever, we finally arrive. I sit down in his office and I'm thinking, Nazareth, I'm like, I said something. He is mad. Like I just walked off the stage and they want to see me right away. I'm like, oh gosh. So I sit down with him, Nazareth, and he shuts the door and I'm thinking, I am in trouble.
Oh no.
And he says, I've seen you speak now at least 6, 7, 8 times. I go, yeah. And so he says, there's something different about you than any other
Mm,
speaker we have. And he goes, and I just want you to tell me what it is. It was amazing. I said, well,
amen.
I said, I have an answer for you. I said, but you're asking me, so I'm going to tell you. But I don't want you to get upset at me for bringing up anything faith driven. I said, but the bottom line is, I said, I've got Jesus in my life. And I said, and whatever light you see, whatever energy you feel, whatever passion you feel, it all comes from him. We talked
Wow.
towards the end. I said, in many conversations I've had with you, every time I turn around, you have a home in a different state. My home in Alaska, my home in Hawaii. I said, something tells me you're doing just fine in your financial life. I said, but you will never have what I have, what you noticed in me until you have Jesus. I go, the money's not going to do it for you. It's great to have money. It's awesome, but it's not going to do it for you. And it was an incredible conversation with this guy about Jesus. As a result, we ended up becoming more friends. We've played golf together. And I feel like I'm in this long 3-year faith conversation with this guy. But one thing, years ago, I used to speak in public schools, high schools,
Oh.
which is, it's the graveyard of speakers.
Yes, yes. It's like paying your dues.
Oh my gosh, you can make it at a high school, you can make it anywhere because they're just out to torment you in front of 2,000 high school students. Someone's, they're trying to be the class clown or whatever. But someone asked me about the public schools. I had the same things happen with principals. And I said on an interview, maybe about a year ago, podcast or something, and I never said it before, but I said it on that one, and I'll say it here, is like, you can legislate his name, but you can't legislate his presence.
Wow.
You can
You
say,
can legislate his name, but you cannot legislate his presence.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. And so it's like, well, you can't say his name at the high school. I get that, and I understand that, and I'll fall to that guidance. But you can't I told the principal, I go, you can't legislate his presence. I told the principal that one time because she knew I was a Christian, and she goes, same thing. I feel something different from you than I other people, and I go, well, it's Jesus. I go, she goes, yeah, but you never bring it up. I go, because you guys won't have me back if I bring it up. And I go, you and I are having a conversation. I go, because you can't legislate his presence. It was intense with the principal. It was intense with the Verizon vice president.
That's amazing. Now, there's some pastors who are listening and they go, we're stuck. And they said, you tell us about the church boom first, how you started it, and then answer that, for a pastor who said, I'm stuck.
Yeah. So I wrote a book called When Your Church Feels Stuck. It did really, really well. And it really was written about the idea of pastors feeling stuck or feeling like they've plateaued or any of that. How do you get unstuck? How do you grow? How do you develop that? And so years ago, about 7, 8 years ago, we started Church Boom, and with the idea of like, man, we care about the local church. It is not doing as well as it used to do in America.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, who was it? I think it was the Washington Post just a few weeks ago said for the first time in America's history, less than half of the population is claiming faith. First time ever in history, according to the Washington Post. So, 8 years ago, started recognizing like, man, we got a problem. And here's was the thing. South Hills Church, the church we started, do we have a problem? No, we're fine. But the big C, the church at large, big problem. And a lot of it came down to, you got pastors with good hearts. They want to make a difference. They just don't know how. They followed the calling. They never really got mentored. They never really got trained. Maybe they need some fresh eyes to help them. And so our thing wasn't, let's start a coaching organization. Ours was, that's part of it, I guess, but ours was, how do we partner with churches and become thinking partners with them? The average church in America is 86 people. In America, right up to the pandemic, we averaged for the last 5 years, Nazareth, America averaged between 150 and 200 churches closing every Sunday.
Wow.
So All these churches through all these denominations are opening and all these churches are shutting down. And we end up in the negative and the negative and the negative every year, the amount of churches. So it's like, we want to do something to stop the bleeding and to help some of these pastors figure out why they're getting stuck and why they're not growing and how to help them. We always say this: professionals get coached, amateurs learn by trial and error. Which one do you want to be? And so here's a church of 50 or 60, and I can take you to a number of churches across the United States that were running 60 or 80 or 90 that never broke 100. And now they're running 200, 225, 250. Now, is that a mega church? No, but they reached 100 more people than they did before, 200 more people. They're bringing in more income. He's starting to hire staff. The pastor's feeling more confident about himself. That is a big deal. So here's one thing I told people. I said, I don't think I have it in me to grow a church to 100,000 people. But can I help 1,000 churches grow 100 each? I can do that. So I can grow a church to 100,000 people. It's just different.
Right. That's wonderful. Now, you also wrote a book called The Insecure Leader. What was that about?
Well, actually, it's not a book. More of I didn't write a book, The Insecure Leader. But I have a big talk that I do and a big.
Okay, the talk. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. But it's a talk I do. It's part of what we do at Church Boom called Insecure Leader, and that is that's just like I mentioned earlier. It's that thing of like, who doesn't have insecurity? And I think pastors, probably even at a greater level, are battling with insecurity, because at the end of the day, there's two things that we compare with each other at conferences: money and people. What your funds look like and how many people. Nobody. And I spoke, I just did in the Insecure talk last week in Albuquerque, 300 or 400 pastors in the room. And I said, okay, this is day 2 of the conference. And it's my turn to speak. And I want to talk about, so I'm talking about the Insecure Leader. You could have heard a pin drop when I said this next thing. I said, we judge money and people. I said, all of you for the last 24 hours, how's your church going, man? What's happening? What are you guys back to now after the pandemic? What is all that? I go, none of you asked to each other, how many people have you baptized? How many salvations have taken place in your church in the last month? I go, nobody's going to ask that question, because we're comparing. And the reason we're comparing is because we're driven by insecurity. We want to see if we're a little bit better than you, so we can feel a little bit better about ourselves. And so here's what I always, when I say that, and then when I say this sentence in the talk in front of pastors, I always say, it's not like we want someone else to fail. We just don't want them to succeed more than us.
That is true. That is true. Now, you also wrote a book, your latest book, called Quit Church.
Yeah. I wrote a book. I've actually written 2 books in the last year: Quit Church, and then new release, Indispensable Church. But Quit Church, by far, that one by far has gotten the most, probably sold the most, but also got the most attention. I mean, it's Quit Church, which is already a, sort of a, title that catches you a little off guard. But then the subtitle is what really gets everybody going. It says Quit Church, and the subtitle is Because Your Life Would Be Better If You Did. And it's real, it's meant to shock people, which it clearly did. I can tell you about that. But, it's really about like, hey, we approach church and our involvement in the local church as pretty shallow, and we're missing out on a lot that God has for us if we would just go all in into the body of Christ and really be all in with God. So we're kind of missing out. But that Quit Church brought a lot of press. I was on Fox News and Friends. I did 4 articles for Fox.
Wow.
One article we did alone, within an hour of its release, produced 16,000 emails across the nation. It was unbelievable. So there was a lot of press that went around that. And clearly all 16,000 emails weren't encouraging me and loving me. You are a jerk. They're not too happy with me. So, because they didn't read the article. The article was not about that. The Quit Church is to grab your attention, because your life would be better if you did. It grabs your attention. It's not meant to be like, hey, quit church. It's not. It's meant to grab your attention and tell you, quit doing church the way you're doing it. Go all in with God. And so it brought a lot of encouraging emails my way. So
So, what do you say to a pastor during this pandemic? Or like, not just we're no, I don't know. I truly, personally believe we're in the ending, like last quarter of the pandemic. But what do you say to pastors right now who are scared, don't know what to do? Should I plan stuff? Should I not? Should I do that? What do you say to them?
yeah, you and are you talking specifically now about like how to move forward with their church? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes.
I think, well, the one thing I've been sharing with pastors, and we do a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of webinars and stuff. And the one thing I've been sharing with pastors across the nation is that you are now in a season of reclaim, but you're also in a season of rebuild. And I think one of the greatest jobs of any pastor or a leader for that matter is you have to define reality. The reality
Mm,
is, hey, you're going to reclaim some. A lot of people are going to come back, but not everybody's coming back. And so your church of 1,000, maybe a church of 600 now or 700. And you're going to have to reclaim some, but you're also going to have to rebuild some. And to think that, it'll all just go back to normal. I wouldn't look at it like that. I think that you have to define reality and say they're not going to come back. Here's one of the reasons why. I'll tell you real quick. I was talking to a guy that his church was running around, about 2018, they were running around 1,000. And when I watched this, from mid 2018 to right up to the pandemic, which is about a year and a half, they went from
right,
1,000 to 1,500. That's huge growth. 500 people in 18 months. Huge, huge growth.
right.
He's like, man, dude, we're only at like around 800. They're in another state, so they opened up a lot faster than California does. But he's like, no, we're not coming back. I said, okay, hold on a second. I go, 500 of your people came to Christ and started coming to your church in the last 18 months. Yeah, yeah, okay, yes. Okay, the average person in America only attends church 1.7 hours per month. So
Per month.
per month,
Ooh,
because they only go to church maybe they go to church every other week or something around there. So that's
yeah.
now I said, so let's mathematically do this. 500 of your 1,500 people that have been coming for the last 18 months, you grew 500 in 18 months. Those 500 people have less than 25 hours invested in their spiritual life. That's all they got. The roots aren't that deep. So don't beat yourself up, Pastor, if you were in a growing church and now it's like, oh my gosh, we're back to this. You got to realize that you got a certain amount of people that have 25 hours, 30 hours at the most invested in their spiritual life. They're not running back to the church because their roots were barely starting to grow. That's not your
Uh-huh.
fault. That's not their fault. That's just a reality.
So you think they should start planning events and activities and stuff?
Yes. I think they need to start moving forward with whatever parameters they can do inside of their state or city or whatever. I do think that to the best of their ability, they need to start doing some more reaching out again. Church I'm working with in Arizona, great church. They're reaching out again. They're doing some great stuff again. They're taking precautions, of course. They're plugging people into ministry. I think that there is some of the main things, services, getting people plugged into serving, getting people plugged into groups. I think those things you need to start doing again. You need to start moving after that again. Absolutely.
I agree because I live on that.
Yeah.
I depend. I, I'm just, this is funny. Just today, like before we call, I got a call from the military in Germany. They want me to come back. So things are starting to open up. We're putting events.
Yeah.
But you said something on Instagram. It said Jesus wasn't interested in limiting the scope of the love we show others.
Mm,
Can you dwell on that? Because I want to talk about the love that we show as Christians. And let
mm,
me just let me put that statement before. It's like I was sharing this with some of my fans. I said I wanted my kids to know the love of Jesus and to love others and to help, to help the lonely people at school. To be with them, and I'm going. There's a reason why they're lonely, and then they started inviting these people to our home, and I found myself hiding the valuables just by looking at the friends that bringing, and then eventually I get to a point where I tell my kids, listen, why don't you just hang around people in the same tax bracket, And let's save the house for the prayer time instead of reaching out. Stuff like that, loving your neighbor. I'm going, wait, how can we love our neighbor? Can Zillow tell us what kind of neighbor we're gonna move next to, so we
Yeah,
know how to love? So what do you say to that, with that statement, and God doesn't want to limit the scope if we love to show others?
yeah. That's kind of birthed out of my newest book that just came out maybe 6 weeks ago, called Indispensable Church.
Hmm.
So I wrote a book called Indispensable Church, and it really is about the idea of churches and individuals inside of the church to figure out, man, how do we flood our communities with love? Instead of saying, hey, we're the church, come visit us. It's like, how do we actually connect with people and reach people on a practical way? And so that's what that book is all about, because I think both as a church, I think people have to do that. That there's an old saying back in the day, was like, if your church was to disappear, would anybody even know it? And as old and tired and worn out that statement is, it's still a pretty compelling question. Like, okay, church, whatever, the first church of whatever shut down on the corner of whatever and whatever. I think most people would drive by and go, yeah, that a church? Didn't that used to be a church? Now it's a Walgreens. Like, I don't think people outside of the church would actually care that it shut down, because it didn't make any difference in the city. It did to the people that went there. But what would it look like if we were to serve the community? Small groups and individuals in a church as a whole. What if there was, 6 times out of the year we did Serve Saturdays, where it was like, man, the teacher's lounge is a mess at the elementary school down the street. Fine, we'll paint it, put a new couch in there, put a new plasma screen and a refrigerator that works for the teachers, and we'll just let them know that we love them from our church. What if, and you just start going down that road of not just, hey, let's feed the homeless. And most churches do that. I don't know why. Not only is it always feed the homeless, but it's always backpacks. I don't know what it is with churches and backpacks. We always like to get them out. I don't know why it is. But man, there's, if you go to lovewhereyoulive.church, man, you'll see there's probably 80 to 100 different ways of like just practical things that we can do to bridge the gap between the church and the state, and just love people, love the community in such a way that the community, the mayor, the city council, if you started doing that now, 2 years ago, man, if they found out your church was going to shut down, they'd freak out and go, whoa, what are we going to do if you guys shut down? You're way too ingrained in our community.
Mm.
Most cities do not feel that way about a church.
What's the website again, Chris?
Lovewhereyoulive.church.
Love where you live, that church. And that's for pastors to look and say,
Pastors
get
or
ideas.
individuals, you can actually buy the book there for 30% off through the publisher, the book Indispensable Church, and you can also just get a ton of ideas there as well.
Perfect. You said something. There are 3 tips for shifting your attitude, and I know some people have this negative attitude right now. How can they shift their attitude?
Yeah, well, in general, I think I think attitude is a big part of it. I always say that you don't get to predict what happens to you, but you can control what happens through you. So I don't get to control what happens to me. I'm sitting in a parking lot, someone backs into my car. I didn't control that. I can just control what happens through me at the process. I do think that attitude also is a spiritual part of things, Nazareth. In Proverbs, it teaches us, he says, a man's life is shaped by his thoughts. Well, where does the attitude start? It always starts in a thought. What we're thinking, how we're feeling, how we're viewing life, how we're viewing people, how we view our work, how we view anything. I think it always comes down to thoughts. And so a man's life is shaped by his thoughts. I think that has to do with attitude, that our life is literally shaped by, man, God, I want to shape to a better life. I also look at Matthew 7:7. Whenever I talk about attitude, I take a scripture that is, most people look at it as prayer, and I do think it's partly to do with prayer. But Jesus said these words: "Ask and it will be given unto you; seek and you will find; knock and the door will be open unto you." If you've been a Christian for any length of time, you've probably heard that verse. But then I always stop at the "seek and you will find," and then I just think, so here's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, "Hey, Nazareth, whatever you seek, you'll find. If you're looking for the worst in your family, you'll find it. And if you're looking for the best, you'll find it too, because whatever you seek, you find. If you're looking for the worst at work, you'll find it. If you're looking for the best, you'll find it too, because whatever you seek, you find. And if you're looking for the worst in your church that you go to, you'll find it. And if you're looking for the best, you'll find it too, because whatever you seek, you find. It's always that way. And I think that's a posture of an attitude. One example I always give is the hummingbird and the vulture. I always say the hummingbird looks for what's new and the vulture looks for what's old. The hummingbird looks for what's alive. The vulture looks for what's dead. The hummingbird looks for what's fresh. The vulture looks for what's stale, and both find exactly what they're looking for.
Wow.
Whatever you seek, you'll find.
That's right. There's a question from one of our listeners, Frank, who said, "How do you start a ministry as your job, or should you have a job then start a ministry you love?"
Of love? Is that what you're talking about?
Let me ask it again. How do you start a ministry as your job, or should you have a job then start a ministry you love?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think it's different for every person. I don't think everybody's called to full-time ministry as a career. I do think that everybody's called to ministry.
Good.
I think it was Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King Jr., but Martin Luther that actually said that. He said, you can be a bus driver who happens to be a Christian, or you can be a Christian who happens to be a bus driver. In other words, I'm a Christian first. I'm a follower of Christ first. And the marketplace is my ministry. So if you're a real estate agent or you're a whatever, that's what you do, and that's fine. But if you're a believer, I think you have to let your light shine there. Now, will God call you possibly to full-time ministry, and that's your thing and that's your vocation? Yeah, but it doesn't mean that you have any less of a call because you're a bus driver or a real estate agent or the executive director of Google. It doesn't matter. If you're a follower of Christ, you have a call no matter where you're at. And it's just a matter of figuring that out.
Has your son or daughter ever said, "Dad, you weren't there. You were so busy in love with the South Hills that you didn't have time for us"?
The answer is no. And I'm sure I've made a lot of mistake as a parent, just like anybody else has. But I would say that is one area I'm very proud of. If my two kids were on here right now, they're young adults now, they would both say Dad was always there. Always.
I love this.
They would say that for sure. When my son started baseball, and of course in California you can play baseball all year round. Loved baseball, left-handed pitcher, played through college, all that. But from 5 years old in a little peewee when they're hitting off the tee, all the way up to into his teenage years, I believe we counted, of all those games, and they're in the hundreds at that point in all those years, I think we counted 5 that I missed. And if I had to catch a red-eye flight from New York, arrive at 7 a.m, get to his game at 9 a.m. on a Saturday because he's 8 years old and I haven't slept in 29 hours, I just wanted, when he went up to bat, I wanted him to look in the grandstand and see me. And I'm not saying that I haven't messed up as a parent, because we've all done dumb things, but I didn't want them to blame the ministry for my mistake. I want them to love Jesus. I want them to love his work.
That is gold, Chris. And that's what I want pastors and people. And based on that question about, do you start a ministry? You have to remember that same thing I would say about my kids. They will never say, "Oh, Dad wasn't there when we needed him." I would fly the red eye like you. It's amazing. Now, as a pastor, have you had, how do you deal with the nagging people, complainers, like, any funny stories about
That's almost a daily occurrence. Oh my gosh. No, that is, yeah, you know what, man? Like 20 years ago, 25 years ago, whatever, if you wanted to complain to a pastor, you had to call, set an appointment, go through his secretary, get on the books for 8 days from now, and then you had to see him. Like if you had a complaint, it wasn't an impulse. You didn't just go to Facebook and blast him or text him or DM him. You didn't do any of that. You had to really want to complain. And so now, it's like if someone really gets upset at you, it takes them all but about 8 seconds to blast your name. And yeah, you deal with that all the time. That criticism will never leave. It doesn't matter if it's being a pastor, but if you're trying to pursue anything great, you're going to get criticized. The safest place to be is in the middle. If
Mm.
you're way behind, people look down at you. If you're way ahead, they criticize you. If you're right in the middle, they'll be okay with you.
Uh,
So the safest place is being in the middle. But oh my goodness, yeah, the criticism that comes in from people in the comments, you know, uh, most of the time I try to handle it good. Sometimes I say things where I'm like, oh dang, I probably said a little too much to them, or set an appointment and blasted them, because they'll throw a scripture out at me and I'm like, I have a bachelor's in theology. Do you really want to go to bat with me on the Bible? Like, so they'll throw a scripture at me and I'll blast them back. And I'm like, oh, don't blast them, love them, love them. So
uh, that's
I,
funny.
I kind of, I got to be careful. I've made a few mistakes in blasting back. That's for sure.
I have two more questions. We're
Yeah,
approaching the hour. I know you have to
yeah,
speak to a group of pastors. The second question will be, how can people get a hold of you? How if they're pastors and want to join the church boom and all that.
yeah.
The last question I want to ask: what do you say to people who are watching or listening who feel maybe because of COVID or not, they're stuck? They don't know what to do. They want to serve. They want to help. They want to do that, but the trials are too much to they feel like God is not really want them to do anything. What do you say to that?
And I think that, especially during the COVID thing, people would ask me that question, in the height of it, about the serving. And I said, I don't, I think opposition always creates opportunity. And I think you have to look and just say, COVID or no COVID, I'm a little nervous. Some people are still nervous. Some people aren't. Some people are getting vaccinated. They're coming to the other side, wherever they're at. I'm positive there's never a moment where you stop serving. I'm positive there's never a moment where you stop volunteering, you stop helping. Now, how that looks at certain times of the year, especially this last year, that may look a little different, but that doesn't mean it changes. I couldn't fly to see pastors for a few months. I'm flying now, but I couldn't for a few months. I couldn't fly. You know what I did, man? I just got on the phone and just said, "Look, this ain't a coaching call. I'm not calling to ask for anything. Just what do you need from me?" We probably made 300 calls. What do you need from me, Pastor? What do you need from me, leader? How can I pray for you? That was my way of serving them, because just
Mhm.
because, like, hey, it's a pandemic, now I'll just binge out on Netflix. That no, I wanted to. I'll watch Tiger King like everybody else did. But I want to figure out how we can serve people. So, and an answer to your question, if there's pastors or pastors listening now, man, we're 1000% committed to just help you grow as a pastor. And if you go to churchboom.org, churchboom, just exactly how it sounds, .org, you can find out about our coaching cohorts. You can reach out to us there. You can hit me up on Facebook, if you want, whatever you want to do. But definitely, we are all about being the pastor's raving fan. And I think a pastor needs coaching. I have 3 coaches in my life: Eddie Rent, Sam Chan, and Dan Ryland. And those are my coaches. And I listen to them all the time. And they're on third, I'm on second. I'm trying to figure out how to get there. And if you're a pastor, we want to help you figure out how to get there. So you can reach out to us and we would love to connect with you and maybe help solve some of the challenges you're facing.
Perfect. Where can people buy your books or hire you as a speaker or a pastor?
Yeah, yeah. You can actually find all of that on my website, chrissonken.com. ChrisSonKsen, chrissonken.com. Speaking's there, books are there, everything's there. And all of it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. I know you're a very busy man, flying all the time and speaking to groups. So appreciate your time, appreciate your friendship, and thank you so much. This is really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, man. It's been an honor to be on here. And thank you, Nazareth, for all that you do for the kingdom. You're an amazing addition. You make so many more people better. We appreciate you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much. Well, God bless you, brother.
Hey, bless you,
Appreciate
my
you.
friend. All right. Have a great
You too. And you guys are watching. I want to remind you to. You can always watch the other 81 episodes that we already had. You can go back and watch it and listen to it. Actually, we do. It's under Comedian Nazareth TV. You'll see all the episodes of our Laughter for All podcast. Also, want to remind you that tonight we are having episode number 265 of the Live with Naz, an hour of laughter and encouragement that will really help you through this pandemic and maybe for later. You need a group of people to pray with you, to make you laugh, and to listen to your funny stuff, or your funny comments. Join us. Uh, you can join us at Comedian Nazareth on Facebook at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, or you can also join us on YouTube under Comedian Nazareth TV, and just laugh with us for an hour. Love you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and you have a blessed, blessed day. We'll see you tonight. And we are done. So thank you so much. And we're also on Roku. If you can go to Roku to the channel called the Motion Network, you can you watch